Hi, welcome. My name is Minachi. My pronouns are my name and they. And I'm looking forward to taking you through some of the building blocks of family constellation work. So, what family constellation work does is it takes an individual and invites that individual to share what is some part of your life that really feels stuck, that feels blocked, that feels clogged, that feels sticky, that it's like no matter how much healing work you feel like you've done, or you've talked about this inside outwards and backwards, you just can't figure out what's going on, such that you can't move forward with your life in the way that you want to. Right. So it invites us first to name that particular blockage and that particular dynamic. And then it invites us to look at that person's lineage and the whole history and context which surrounds them and surrounds that particular block and that particular energetic sludge, and we do this for a couple of reasons. First, when we begin to understand the patterns that are around us, and also the patterns that we may have unconsciously started playing into. As soon as we begin to recognize those patterns, we can set them down. We could say, oh, I see what that pattern does, and I don't choose that moving forward, right? So it's almost like any baggage which may have been unconsciously passed down in the lineage, we can just let it go and we can let it float away or sit still or move where it needs to. The other thing is that when we begin to see just the broader fabric in which our life is sitting and how these patterns are playing out, we can sometimes soften in compassion. A lot of times when we feel like we're not living the life that we want, or we feel really stuck, there can be a lot of criticism and self-blame, as though it's all on my shoulders, that it's just me, right, who's getting in my own way. And when we begin to just see how much we're actually carrying, we can be gentler and kinder to ourselves moving forward. And then the third thing is, again, when we really begin to see the fabric of all that we are a part of, right? Not just our own family systems, but the broader communities and societies that we plug into, we can really shift things such that we're able to receive love from people who want to give us love. And we're also able to understand how we plug in and how we want to flow love forward to the next generation or to others that we care about. So the premise of family constellation work, again, is that there are, that we have our generations, we have our lineage, that it goes big person to little person. And in an ideal system, love will flow downstream. So what this means is that big person will take care of little person. Now, this does not mean that little person doesn't love big person. Little people are really good at love. And inevitably, little people do love big people. I'm thinking about the little people in my life and just how much I love having their arms wrapped around me, and how fun it is to, go in for a finger squeeze and share hugs and kisses together. But it really is this idea that caregivers are responsible for creating nurturing spaces and nurturing environments where younger people can genuinely grow and blossom. And then younger people are responsible for going into the world and being the best version of themselves, right? And so I think that things can get really confusing sometimes, particularly when we think about this idea of reciprocity, right? Some people hold the belief that reciprocity is I give you a cookie, so you give me a cookie. And within family systems and within lineages and from generation to generation, I think that's not the way it works. And it can be helpful to remember that reciprocity can also be I bake you a cookie And then you get to enjoy that cookie. You get to just, savor in the chocolate chips and the snickerdoodles and the ginger snaps. And the reciprocity is me being able to flow my love to you by baking you this delicious cookie and just be with you in how wonderful it is for you to enjoy receiving something, right? And that's really what it should be from caregiver to child. When I hug the little people in my life, it's not so that they can hug me back. It's so that I get to give them all the love that I think is nourishing for them. And if they don't want a hug, then I don't hug them. Right? They're not responsible for hugging me when I want them to hug me. They're not responsible for validating or affirming the way I offer my love to them. I am responsible for understanding the little people in my life and then showing up for them in a way that nourishes and best supports them. So, again, this is the ideal flow of love where big person will take care of little person and little person moves out into the world to be their best version of self. With that said, what can happen is trauma will hit somewhere in the system. And trauma is just one of those things where if a person doesn't have enough support or resources, it can be really, really hard for that caregiver to navigate anything moving forward. It can be really hard for that caregiver to show up fully for all of the beloved beings in their lives. And so, what can happen when there is a traumatic event where there hasn't been sufficient care and there aren't sufficient resources is the flow of love begins to get interrupted and the flow of love begins to get fractured, right? So, big person is no longer able to show up for and no longer able to love little person in the way that little person really, really needs. And subsequently, what can happen is more traumas can happen. And sometimes it's like a domino effect from the first trauma, because something bad happened here and then something rough happens again to the next generation. Sometimes it's just life bringing a new piece of trauma into the system, right? But as it goes, what happens is the love gets fractured and fractured and fractured, such that it's this really, really choppy flow down the stream. And that little person at the end is not getting really what they need in order to feel held and cared for, and in order to feel safe just going out into the world and being their best version of self. With all of that said, when little people come into this world, they are brilliant embodiments of love, right? We were all little people one day. And I promise you, when we came in, we were just like wildly nourished, coming in direct from source, full of love embodiment. And what can happen when little people come in and they experience the environment around them? Little people are tremendously intuitive. They just know and understand that something is wonky in the system. They can unconsciously begin to do this thing where they just say, hold up, nobody move. I have just come in directly from source. I have all this love to give and to offer. And so, what I am going to do is I am going to flow this love back upstream and I am going to heal everybody who needs to be healed. So, watch out, mom, watch out, grandma, watch out, everybody who I haven't even met, but I know is in there hurting and in pain. I am going to live my life in such a way that you feel better and you feel healed, right? Ooh, I can feel things coming up in my system. I'm just like, right? Because that's not what little people are here to do. Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but like little people are here to be themselves. Little people are not here to be the things that their ancestors needed or that our caregivers needed, and etc. But this is the way that we begin to flow love upstream. So, some of the ways that little people can try and heal the ones who came before them, right, is by attempting to live the lives our beloved ancestors or caregivers were unable to live for themselves. And I see this a lot. I am from an immigrant community, first generation, and a lot of my colleagues and loved ones, people that I grew up with, right, I see so many of us striving to live a certain type of life or a certain quality of life, at least on the outside, because our parents gave up so much for us to be here, because our parents sacrificed their own dreams in order for us to have access to a different type of dreaming. And then, ironically, what can happen is that we begin to live our lives based on the dreams that our parents had instead of living our lives based on the dreams that we have for ourselves. So, this is one of the ways that we attempt to flow love upstream, by living the lives that our parents or ancestors were unable to live. Another way that we attempt to flow love upstream is by reiterating traumatic patterns in our own lives in order to provide accompaniment to our beloved ancestors or caregivers. Y'all, it's a sneaky one. This one is the most subversive thing that I have ever seen. So again, I come from a lineage where there's a lot of gender-based violence, and domestic violence was the norm. And I swore growing up, I swore up and down the street, I would never get into a relationship like the one that I saw modeled in my own home. And while it is true that I didn't ever wind up in any relationship that explicitly mirrored what I saw growing up and what I saw at home, there came a point where I was like, oh, I am repeating the patterns that I saw my amma play out with my appa. And my amma is my mother, my appa is my father, right? And a lot of times that can be a way at a subconscious level where we are saying, Amma, I love you. I couldn't get you out of that situation. So instead, what I am going to do is I am going to put my own self back in that same situation over and over and over again, so that you know that I am with you, and you know that you will always have a place to belong and be loved, so that you know that I will never leave you no matter what. And again, this can be a tremendously subconscious and tricky thing to unearth and navigate, because I have never seen anybody on purpose do this, but it happens at a very, very deep core level. And then the third way that I've seen folks attempt to flow love upstream is by attempting to heal the wounds of our ancestors. So different practitioners will have different philosophies, and I always encourage people to work with many different practitioners so that you know the philosophy and the vibe that is right for you. For me, I do not believe that our ancestors need us to heal anything on their behalf. I believe that our ancestors have agency at whatever time it is to engage in and embody their own healing work wherever they might be, right? So they don't need us to do anything for them. With that said, what I do believe is true is that when we approach healing from a genuinely self centered place, and not self centered as in I am more important than somebody else, but self centered in the sense of I matter and I am important. And I choose this healing for me, because healing for me feels good and is nourishing. And I am worthy of giving myself that time. When we engage in healing work from that lens and that perspective, it sets off this radical vibration throughout the entire system, to our friends, our family, our neighbors, the grocery store clerk. It doesn't matter. People can feel it when we are in that vibration, and it can become a reminder to them of like, oh, I have agency to access that healing. Like I can do that too. Whatever that healing might look like, for those people in those way at that time, it's just a reminder that healing is accessible and healing is a choice. So again, I don't operate from the belief that we need to heal anybody else. I do operate from the belief that when we heal for ourselves, it becomes an invitation for everybody else to do the work that is theirs. So we'll pause here, invite you to slow your breathing, or just notice even where your breathing is and how your body is feeling. You can give yourself some stretch and some movement. Drink some water and just check in. What sensations are present for you? Put one hand on your stomach, one on your heart. Wiggle your toes and see. And then, do these sensations carry any meaning for you? What questions are coming up and what wisdom is coming forth?